Great. I'm going to totally look like an idiot on this show.
You break down. I never give you my number. I only give you my situation. And in the middle of investigation, I break down. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter, setting fire to everything this side of the Mississippi. And the other, I guess, as well. We're kind of split.
Yeah, we are.
Oh, well. Here we are. Like it or not.
So a song about negotiation.
Yes.
I feel like I've heard that now.
You probably have. Like you say, if you had like the soundtrack, you could get it figured out.
You give me your money. What was that now?
Yeah. You never give me your money. You only give me your funny papers.
It's not the Beatles, is it?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
You did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like number 5.
4. Don't stretch it.
Now 5.
What?
Now 4. Super Bowl Shuffle.
Yeah.
That's like I got the Guns N' Roses one.
Yeah.
I swear that's 5 out of like 114 shows.
One?
Yeah, there was that Axl guy saying that one song. But remember, it was a song like a bunch of guys had sang, and I remembered Guns N' Roses.
Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Yeah, Guns N' Roses had sang it, but other people had.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're right. I forgot about that one.
Okay. I'm just gonna take credit for 5, whether that's right or not.
I think that might be right. I forgot about Knocking on Heaven's Door.
5.
Wow.
Tell you what, that really helps my bad mood.
Yeah, good.
I'm not in a good mood today.
No? Why is that?
Before we get into what we're going to get into, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, totally non-political, totally off the wall.
Okay.
Amazon Prime.
Yes.
That I was a member of for 3 years, and they took $100 a year out of my bank account, and I didn't know.
Yes.
Got rid of the Dukes of Hazzard today.
What?
Everything I downloaded, everything's unavailable now.
Why? Because it's racist?
I don't know, but I almost cried.
I would.
I was.
That show has brought me much joy.
It
over
is
my childhood and
honestly, it was one of the greatest family shows or anything you could possibly find.
Absolutely.
So, my wife got me, and I haven't really watched them very much. One of my favorite shows in the '90s was Home Improvement.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Tim Allen a lot, not just because he's Republican.
Right.
I actually didn't know that at the time. Okay, but but it got me to thinking, Jay, and I have no idea. I watched a couple episodes today.
Yeah.
I didn't like the mom on that show.
Right.
I didn't like her. Not her, the actress.
Just her.
The character.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just the because although Tim was supposed to be the tough, grunting guy, it was the wife who kind of ran. He was always, here's what I got to thinking.
Yeah.
There was a big shift in television. I go back to the 80s, and I can't think of a television mom I didn't like.
Wow.
I don't know why.
Yeah?
Actually, I do know why. I'm going to explain in a minute.
Okay.
I watched reruns. I wasn't alive during the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family and all those shows in the 60s and early 70s. It was hard not to like Florence Henderson. Mm-hmm. It's hard not to like Shirley Jones.
Right.
I was always partial to Mrs. Huxtable because there's a person with a career, yet she's classy and I always liked the mom on Who's the Boss. Always reminded me of my mom.
She wasn't tough enough on Alyssa Milano, if you ask me. But
true, but I can't think of her real name.
What about Wheezy?
Wheezy, I liked Wheezy. That's right, Wheezy. I thought she was great too. I was just moving on up. Look out, Wheezy. But the 90s began this trend of TV moms being kind of the mouthy, And I
cutting their husbands down.
yeah, and then the husbands became the little pussycats.
Yeah.
And nowhere could you find that more than a great show in Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah.
You had the yelling, screaming wife, and the man who was just the biggest wimp. And it was like I don't know. It was a totally different dynamic. I didn't like it. And I'm not saying the man should be. I just think if the man were yelling and screaming and name calling, that would be considered abuse.
Yeah.
The woman does it. Everybody laughs about it. And
Right.
I sat there watching Home Improvement and thinking, God, watching the mom just cut down and Tim Allen's character would never say anything like that in return. It's kind of like, what is that? What happened? What happened to Elise Keaton and Maggie Seaver and all these great characters all became the mouthy, lippy King of Queens is another example. Even though
really liked her.
I never minded her. I'm a Dodger fan. Anybody with a Brooklyn accent, I impartial to. But yeah, again, it was the woman became sort of the strong, mouthy, complaining type. And what happened there on television? Is that a directive from the Nows or something that we had to have women like that on TV? And then, of course, television, everybody copies each other.
Right. It's like local government.
Yeah. It's just, once one has a reality show, they've all got to rip off American Idol.
Right.
And rip off Survivor, rip off Bill Cosby, rip off All in the Family. They've all got to rip off everybody.
Right.
But what happened to TV moms? TV moms were so great. They were always the understanding ones. They were always the
nurturing.
There was, I always say this that my mom and dad were very, very different, but together they were great parents. It's like my dad was the tough guy. He was the Marine. He was the guy who worked on his truck and had a bad back and drank a case of beer while the ball game was on in the garage and threw tools against the wall and loved sports and loved his fellow vets. And my mom was the one that made sure my teeth were brushed and my clothes didn't clash and had that love of reading and history and stuff that I have. And it's like, I feel like I saw that reflected a lot on television.
Yeah.
And then it became almost a different dynamic.
Society has changed, though, too. I mean...
So it's a reflection, really, of...
It could be a reflection, or, was it Andy Warhol? Does life imitate art or art imitate life?
Yeah.
But you think about it, it's like, you don't really have it anymore where the husband goes and part of it, I think, is the breakdown of the family with women working more. And that's not, I'm not saying women working more is a bad thing.
Two-income households.
Yeah, right, exactly, where you don't have a parent that's with the children as much, things like that. But where you're expected to have more co-parenting, right, where before the dad would parent by playing ball with the kid, taking them fishing, working on the car with them.
Cub Scouts.
Yeah, doing manly type things. Yeah. Right. And now it's about, is it my night to cook or your night to cook? Who's doing the dishes?
Who's having the discussion about your feelings?
Right.
We've been Oprah'd.
Family dynamics have taken a turn, and I don't know if that's because of what Hollywood put out or if it was just reflecting what was already becoming. I was a little young at that point to really be perceptive of that.
I was always the leader in perception.
Yeah.
No.
Really?
But it's just a weird, when you go back and you watch shows, older shows, then newer older shows, because you don't have shows like that anymore. Everything's reality now.
Right.
It's just interesting how very much things changed very, very fast.
Yeah.
And it's just a weird thing. I mean, who's your favorite TV character of all time?
Oh, goodness. Of all time?
Yeah, sure. Any kind of TV.
Quick Draw McGraw. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it was probably Luke Duke. I mean, he was my, favorite, I think.
Oh, wow. That's
Again,
not bad.
The underdog, Bo got all the attention. I felt bad for Luke. He was my guy.
Luke always had the new ideas, though.
Exactly. He was the smart one.
You talk about a show, and getting back to the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
A show for everybody. I remember trying to pretend I was Luke Duke.
Yeah.
I had a good friend who was blonde.
Yeah.
He was always Bo. But you had a show where you had the three main people, Daisy and the Duke boys.
Right.
I remember Uncle Jesse kind of reminded you of like your grandfather, always the good advice, always the patriarch, that history shown. You had Cooter and Enos, two best friends you could possibly have. And then you had the Laurel and Hardy combo of Boss and Roscoe,
right?
Who were scoundrels, but you loved them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember one of the things that made Roscoe so loved, other than that, was the dog,
right?
Flash, Velvet Ears. I mean, you had a car that was kind of like a star of the show as well. I mean, you had a dynamic there that anybody could watch, anybody could understand, and the show kind of got panned as being simplistic and kind of good old boy kind of stuff. But the show wasn't meant to change the world.
It was physical comedy along with like
stunts,
old muscle cars racing and stunts, and it's not to like about it.
Going to get the robbers and
I've been to the Dukes of Hazzard museum in Nashville. It's run by Cooter. Yeah,
Ben Jones.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm like, oh, I had that. I had that.
Here's how much times have changed too. When I was a kid, when I was in elementary school, I had two lunch boxes the entire time. The first one I had the picture of the General Lee, a Confederate flag was on my, and then I had a Hulk Hogan lunchbox after that.
Of course you did. Yeah.
So I mean, maybe I had more. That's what I remember.
Okay.
But I had a Confederate flag on my lunchbox. Wow. And this was at the time where models of the General Lee and the Rubik's Cube were the two hottest selling. I remember my dad had a Rubik's Cube he used to swear at in the garage to get ticked off that he couldn't solve it. He did, but they were the top selling toys when I was like 7, 8 years old, something like that. The General Lee, a car with the Confederate flag on it. 30 some odd years ago was the top selling.
I never thought about what kind of lunchbox I've had. I
don't know why I remember these things.
I had a speed buggy lunchbox.
Really?
I think in elementary school. Yeah. Thinking about it just a little bit, letting the wheels turn. I seem to remember that.
Luke Duke as your favorite television character.
Yeah, maybe followed by Murdoch from the A-Team.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know who my favorite would be. I was a fan of always a fan of a detective show.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shows was Magnum P.I. I used to love that show.
Me too.
And Tom Selleck was a baseball fan.
Yeah.
And I always wore the Tigers hat. And my mom thought he was so handsome. Yeah. So I mean, but I remember I always liked those detective kind of shows.
Yeah.
And they were real big at that time. So as far as you could pick any one of a million. I mean, it's it's different. I was always partial to Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael J. Fox was hot then as an actor. Back to the Future and Secret to My Success and some other Doc Hollywood were out there, but I always liked his character. So I mean, the TV moms just came into my head today. Watching a wife constantly berate and put down a husband was just kind of that, and the Dukes of Hazzard going off of Amazon Prime. And now I got to go find the DVDs. Now I got to go to Amazon and get the DVDs. I pay $100 a year for it, and now I have to go buy them.
Yeah, well. Maybe they'll pop up somewhere else, like Netflix or something like that.
What's the other one? Ola?
Ola?
No.
I don't know.
Hulu.
What
did I say?
Ola.
Okay.
It's like the
Hulu.
Spanish
I don't know.
subscription network.
Aloha. I was thinking Hawaii, Hulu, but Hulu.
Yeah.
So there's Hulu dancing or whatever.
Oh my word!
My word association is just all right.
That's all right.
All right, enough Dukes of Hazzard talk.
Yeah,
we got important business, Jay. We always have important business. Do we ever? And one of these local lowdown things, we'll actually talk about local stuff one of these times.
Yeah.
But, we have to change it up once in a while. And if I get angry about something, I have to come here. This is the point of having a show. We spout off what we're thinking about.
Right.
And, wonder if people out there are thinking the same thing. Now, for today's topic, Jay, we've done some shows that have been a little outside the box recently. I've enjoyed them a lot. I think it's been cool. Hopefully it's been cool for the listeners too. And this is kind of another one of those. Because you and I have spent 2.5 years now talking about cities and counties and whoever else joining all of these groups and implementing these international policies, and we've covered everything from the Covenant of Mayors to ICLEI to Green Step to you name it, to UN stuff. But we haven't talked about, and what's an interesting philosophical thing for everyone to think about, and of course, since it's critical thinking, you're not going to get it anywhere but here, is whether local and state governments can join these things. The Constitution, Jay, is very clear on who has the authority to enter into international treaties. Now, this is where we parse everything. What's a treaty? What's an agreement? What's I would argue any treaty is voluntary. I don't know how you I don't know how you bind people in a treaty. Go look up the Versailles Treaty and tell me anybody followed that anywhere. I mean, they're just words on paper that really ultimately are voluntary.
Well, they're really backed by the good faith of the government that signs it, with the idea being that if you break the treaty, all deals are off.
Ideally, breaking it, it's like a contract.
Yes.
You and I make a contract with each other and keep the lawyers out of it. Or we'll know when one of us has breached it.
Or in this case, keep world government out of it and just handle it country to country.
Exactly. I mean, and many treaties today often are subject to the International Court of
the World Court
monkey business or whatever you call it. I don't even know what you call it. It doesn't matter. But you're right. I mean, disputes. I mean, there's the World Trade Organization and things like that think they can come in and
the UN
nullify any deal that two countries faithfully execute and is approved by whoever does the approving of those countries. And, it's not always the good guys.
Right.
Okay, so when Hitler and Stalin agreed, I don't recall the League of Nations coming in and endorsing that.
Right.
So but why is there? I mean, I'm just fascinated how there's no discussion of the legality of this might be a crazy example, and we'll get into some of what we're talking about. But let's just pretend. I'm going to go off the wall here. The Iran deal a couple of years ago, which had its pluses and minuses, in my opinion. I'm not going to go through it. What if a city or a state decided, well, you know what? We don't like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to enter into a voluntary, quote unquote, side agreement with Iran. It doesn't necessarily have to be the government, because you can deal with, companies, individuals, but we're going to circumvent the agreement that was signed, approved by the Senate. What kind of? You go back to the Articles of Confederation. This is one of the reasons this is in the Constitution. Is that, and by the way, that's what we had between Yorktown and the Constitution for those of you out there who don't know what that is, which is probably most of you. Actually, with our audience, it's probably a much higher percentage than most. But that we had 13 states acting as independent countries. They were making agreements with other nations. They all had their own currency. They all had, it was not a union of states.
Right.
So we came together and created the United States. Now, what would going around a deal like that cause if all 50 states could make their own judgment on what to follow and what not to follow? Then you have no agreement. This is why. This is different. This is a power enumerated in the Constitution. This is not some legal pitfall or something that you can interpret 500 different ways. Treaties and what states can do and what the federal government, what the president can do with the advice and consent of 2/3 of the Senate is pretty darn clear.
And this is why it is important. You look at Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, and it gives the president the power to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur.
Right.
So there's a check and a balance built in there. The president can't just go anywhere and say, hey, Finland, let's sign this. No, it's got to come back through the Congress. And then you have the Supremacy Clause, which provides that all treaties, like statutes, count as the supreme law of the land. So really, they overshadow any other law that we have. That's just the way that they work. And that's why only the president can make treaties, provided that 2/3 of the Congress approves it.
2/3 of the Senate.
Yes, senators.
And 2/3 of the Senate is not easy to achieve.
No.
I mean, we've seen 50% is hard to achieve. So, but again, that's also a check and a balance in and of itself, that it's not going to be one party dictating something. Now, we've gotten around that, though, in some cases.
Right.
Because what is a treaty and what's an agreement?
Right.
I think
an agreement is non-binding.
Okay,
There's no punishment for you. It's like good.
But again, like you talked about good faith. I mean, like to me, NAFTA is a treaty.
Yes.
But it was never treated as a treaty.
Right.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Treated as a treaty. That's too many treats.
You never have enough treats.
Yeah. So, we've gotten away from that in some instances as far as the federal government is concerned. But I'm more concerned about local because you look at something like, I'll bring up the Paris Accords as one. We have, I don't know how many states and cities, a gazillion. Oh, not that many states, maybe 10 or 12. That have decided that even though we have withdrawn, and this treaty was never ratified, 2/3 of the Senate never agreed to this. It's like Kyoto or anybody else, because we went through this with Kyoto too, where even though it was rejected by the United States Senate, local governments tried to go around it and implement it anyway. And their excuse is, well, it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. Well, like you said, it's all about good faith on both sides. So if you are following an international treaty that has been withdrawn by your federal government and was never ratified by the Congress, do you have the authority to then implement that treaty where you are in your state or your city or your county or your island or whatever?
So far, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Why
is that the answer so many times?
Because it's government and they don't want to be boxed in. They don't want to follow the law, Andrew.
Well, of course they don't.
No.
I mean, but I'm fascinated by how nobody seems to want to bring up on either side anywhere about whether states and cities can do that. Now,
well, they can't. Technically speaking, they can't sign a treaty, but what they can do is sign on to something not as a treaty, but as a symbolic gesture. In fact, if we look at the Paris Accords specifically, there's a group we've mentioned before, the United States Conference of Mayors, that has gone and symbolically they're urging cities to sign on and take the actions necessary within their cities.
Okay, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. If they're taking action, then it's not symbolic.
Well, they say it is because they're not beholden to it. So they're putting their name out there. It's like, hey, yeah, when I get home, I'll go watch your TV show or whatever, you know. There's nothing enforcing it. There's no teeth. There's no backbone. But other than the political will of these mayors to go back home and implement things like out of Minnesota Green Step cities.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you brought up Article 2 of the Constitution. Let me bring up Article 1, Section 10.
Okay.
You talk about states. It prohibits states from entering into treaties, alliances, or confederations. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty wide...
An alliance or a confederation. I mean,
that's a wide net of things. Now, you could call it... Now, I think what is meant, perhaps, is an alliance with another country.
Right.
But the Paris Accords is that, but it's not military. Yeah. It's not... it's not the way we would traditionally think of something like NATO or something of that sort. And by the way, NATO has been another thing.
Yeah.
President Trump has questioned NATO's role, which I think is proper to do. I mean, NATO was a defensive agreement.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. And we've heard rumblings from all over the country that we're going to honor NATO. Well, wait a minute here. I mean, what is that? You fight that battle in Congress, whether you win it or lose it. You don't take it to City Hall.
Right.
So, I mean, there's this, I mean, and Jay, I vacillate back and forth sometimes because I'm always a local guy first.
Right.
I believe government should work from the bottom up, not the top down.
Yes.
But I also believe in following this thing. It's a document, starts with a C.
Yeah.
It's called the Constitution. And the 9th and 10th Amendments apply to things not enumerated in the Constitution, are left to the people in the states.
The treaties are enumerated in the Constitution.
They are enumerated many times. Okay, so it's like I said, this has become a gray area. Mm-hmm. Go back to 1992. Go back to Agenda 21 and the Rio quote unquote agreement. And again, they call it an agreement, not a treaty.
Right.
And the United States signs on to it.
Yep.
There's no debate. There's no hearings. There's no. It happened right in the middle of a presidential campaign.
Right,
and it wasn't even talked about.
And then Bill Clinton goes and signs an executive order in, and that didn't go through Congress.
No
2/3 of the senators signed on to that.
No senators signed on to it. Basically, signed an executive order in 1993.
Yeah.
Committing it created the Council on Sustainability, which was used by the executive branch to push Agenda 21 policy. Even though if you read the Southern Poverty Law Center, this supposedly never happened.
Right.
So, the point being, here we entered into an international treaty that was not only not voted on, didn't even make the nightly news.
Yeah.
So,
unbelievable.
How does that happen during a presidential election? That should have been as political as possible.
Yeah.
And it absolutely wasn't whatsoever.
Right.
It was a sense of the House or something that was passed. So, and then what has stemmed from that, Jay? What has stemmed from that is ICLEI.
Right.
Which is another international organization, which again is a quote-unquote non-binding volunteer. So therefore, it has the cloak that you don't have to, quote, do something, even though, like you said, it's all about the good faith of both negotiating partners.
And just so that we source our work and everybody knows that we're not just blowing smoke, you can go to this is a government website, clintonwhitehouse2.archives.gov.
Yeah.
And you can look, and it has Executive Order number 12852. It is the President's Council on Sustainable Development
June
from
1993.
July 20th,
Oh, July
1993. And it's right there. So,
Yeah, in fact, it's even the Clinton Library and Massage Parlor. If you go to their website, it's got all of things.
Southern Poverty Law Center couldn't afford to get an internet connection and check it out.
Yeah. Well, they were too busy designating Christian churches as hate groups.
Well, that too.
So, but again, that brings up to, how did we get to this point? How did we get to where 600 cities, counties are part of ICLEI?
Yeah.
Some international to enforce locally.
Yes.
An international agreement that we never signed, never was done with the advice and consent of the Senate, and never was even debated or covered.
Right.
People don't even know most people don't even know Agenda 21 exists.
And it's become like a laughing stock, like, oh, that's a conspiracy. No, you can find it on the UN website.
Yeah. You can't find it under Agenda 21. You have to look up Rio Summit from 1992.
Right.
That's what you have to look up because they know that people are out there searching. So.
Right. So you've got that.
Yeah, they didn't meet. I guess they didn't meet. I guess that's what.
Agenda 2030 is the thing that they're going towards now.
Well, and I would say this: if Agenda 21 is a conspiracy, why did they meet in 2012 and 2017 at Rio Plus 20 and Rio Plus 25 to assess how everybody's doing?
Yeah.
So if it didn't happen, then why are they checking our progress?
Exactly.
So yeah, but you think about this, and you think about all of these things that were brought in, and did not go through the proper process, and we're doing them anyway. Mm-hmm. And what are the consequences of that? And how much worse can this get? I mean, where is it going to go from here? If we don't sign on to the next climate deal or the next solar panel invention, or you name it, the next UN thing they can cook up, what's going to stop anybody from just implementing it anyway?
Exactly.
It's the same thing we always talk about.
Yeah, and the local groups have been, these groups locally go and do an end run around Congress, around state legislatures, and to get these things implemented locally. And we sit and laugh at something like the Green New Deal, but what's to say that doesn't end up at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and as part of Green Step cities?
No. Here's the danger. The danger is. It's going to fail in Washington. It's failing. They don't even
they won't even vote on it. They tried to take a vote.
The people who propose it don't even know what's in it.
Yeah.
So what they're going to do is they're going to repackage it, rename it, and bring it to your city or your county. They might try state legislators first.
They might.
They may. And And some watered down variation of this is slowly going to get implemented, even if it gets rejected.
Right.
Where it is right now. I mean, we've seen this with, like we've talked about, ranked choice voting, tobacco 21, minimum wage. How many of these issues have we voted one way on at the state capitol or in Washington, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, that same issue is now being debated in City Hall.
Yep.
So with the Green New Deal, that's exactly where it's going to go.
Absolutely.
I mean, or this could be just as bad. A president could implement it executively.
Right.
And create new standards for the Department of Energy, Housing and Urban Development, transportation, blah, blah, blah.
It's all funneled down to localities.
Yes, they certainly do.
Let me pose something, because you had asked a question about what do we do? I mean, there's really no recourse for cities that get involved in this, and we look at these cities like most notably Oakland, who goes to a lot of these conferences, and there are mayors often from all over the world, or city staff from all over the world, especially like ICLEI conferences, some like the Mayor's Compact. I know they had met up in Canada last year.
City Lab.
Yeah, a lot of these that they take and bring people together from cities all over the globe. And I don't know if you've given this much thought, but
I'm sure I have.
Back in,
I'm sure I have, Wheezy.
Yeah. All the way back when the Constitution was brought in, shortly after that, in 1799, at the end of the year, they signed the Logan Act, which is a federal law that criminalizes negotiation by unauthorized persons with foreign governments having a dispute with the United States. Now, if the United States is not going to put in the Paris Accords and we come out of them, are we not in a dispute with the countries that want the Paris Accords? And then if we have our local leaders, elected officials, I'll use that word, going out and working with the elected officials or dictators of other cities and countries out there, is that not a violation of the Logan Act?
Wow. Now read that again. Read the Logan Act again.
It's a federal law that criminalizes negotiation by unauthorized persons with foreign governments having a dispute with the United States.
So,
and let me read the next sentence. The intent behind the act is to prevent unauthorized negotiations from undermining the government's position.
Wow. You're right. I hadn't thought of it, and I thought I think of everything. Once again, I learn new things, Jay, and
Yeah.
I'm always. We learn new things on the fly on this show. So
only 2 people have ever been indicted on.
I'm sure
on
it's a
charges of
high
violating
bar,
the act, but it is a felony.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a felony.
Yeah.
Now, when it says we are in dispute with, is that defined as military, or is that defined, like, for example, say we're during the Iraq War? I mean, you couldn't have the governor of Delaware going to meet with Saddam and trying to broker a deal.
Right.
Okay, that would be a violation.
Right.
But what is the definition of dispute, I guess, is where
here's
legally.
Here's where it came from. In 17, and I'm just reading from Wikipedia here. But
France war scare?
Yeah, in 1789, you had the U.S. and France, and President Adams sent
99. Yeah.
Or sorry, 1798 is when the tensions were.
And you had
growing.
the Alien and Sedition Acts passed as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So President Adams sent 3 envoys to France to negotiate. Negotiations were unsuccessful, right? So Dr. George Logan of Pennsylvania, a state legislator and a pacifist, he engaged in negotiations with France as a private citizen during the Quasi-War. And then the Logan Act was basically a response to that effort, and that they went after him on that. Logan was a Democratic Republican and was trying to thwart the policy of the Federalists. So
who has been indicted under this?
Well,
Curious, what are the circumstances? Can we get Jake Spano arrested over here in St. Louis Park?
I don't know that that's likely.
Damn. Like to see the glasses they'd give him there.
Yeah. They have, they list accusations of violations. I could read through this.
It gets so political. I mean, it's got to be hard in a court of law to convict somebody.
Yeah.
But I mean, you do bring up a good point about okay, we're having a dispute. It's not a war.
Right.
I would call it a disagreement.
Yeah.
And yet we have, here's the caveat to that.
Yeah.
Are they entering into negotiations? Okay, the negotiations have already happened. The United States agreed and then pulled out, which is their right to do. So they aren't entering into negotiations, but they are undermining the federal government's constitutional duty that they have.
Right.
So where's the give and
I mean,
take?
there is a negotiation happening. It's like, hey, will you sign on to this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess
They're really poor negotiations.
Yeah.
But
one-sided negotiation. It's a yes man negotiation. I don't know. I mean, it's just how extreme could this possibly go? I mean, and as the big cities kind of act like, I would argue they're acting like independent countries. I mean, coming up with their own income taxes in some cases, coming up with trying to have socialized medicine, sanctuary cities. I mean, where does it end as far as those undermine the federal government and federal law? I mean, where does it end as far as what they can do to usurp the federal government? And again, I want to express something here. When you talk about, I want to go back to nullification.
Okay.
When you go back to not necessarily what Thomas Jefferson or John Calhoun proposed, because Jefferson proposed, what Jefferson wanted was a constitutional amendment, and that's the proper way to do this.
Absolutely.
If you go back to the Kentucky resolutions, where they wanted to set up a process to which states could reject a federal law that they thought was unconstitutional. Now, remember, very specific when you're talking about somebody like Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
John C. Calhoun proposed something where any state could nullify something.
John C. Calhoun or Makusa?
Oh, yeah. Makadadawaka? Whatever. I don't know. But,
okay.
It's like Calhoun
as
to
he's
me.
known. Yeah. Okay.
And that led, of course, to the dispute in 1832 over the tariff and all that.
Yeah.
So should there be? I'm just going to throw this out here because I think Jefferson's right. You have to amend the Constitution and put something in place. Should there be a legal process in which states can overrule the federal government? Is nullification, quote unquote, a constitutional one? Is that a avenue? I mean, I'll make a broader argument.
Okay.
When Obamacare was passed,
yes,
there were attorney generals who tried to sue the federal government.
Yes.
I don't know that that's the right way to fight that either, but it was almost like they were arguing to nullify a health care law or overturn it or whatever you want to say. What is the process? What should it be if you have an out-of-control tyrannical federal government? You can always say, well, wait till the next election, but, a lot of damage can be done in a short amount of time. Look at the New Deal. I mean, look at 1913. I mean, they should have some sort of recourse. What should that be?
Yeah, and I think that's a different line when you're talking about domestic issues and foreign issues.
Yeah.
When you have a squabble with your own government versus siding with another government to undercut your own. I think that there might be instances where that's okay, but where you draw that line, because then you would have California running around with everybody.
Yeah. It'd be part of Venezuela.
Right. But, if you had, say, total hypothetical, let's say World War II, the U.S. sides with Germany. Should the states be able to decide we're not sending soldiers? You're not taking our men.
I don't know, because if you don't have a draft,
right,
and the federal, the president's the commander in chief. I mean, where do you get? I mean, National Guard is technically under the direction of the governor,
right?
I don't know.
But I mean,
but we don't. Here's the thing: we don't. Here's the thing: we don't declare war anymore,
right?
So there's no.
But I mean, there are other instances. But in an instance like that, let's put it in modern terms. Let's say that for some reason the federal government becomes so enamored with trying to make peace with North Korea that they join forces with North Korea, or with Vlad, or over in Russia,
or China.
Or China. Pick your terrible dictator-led country,
which is a lot of them, unfortunately.
Right, unfortunately. So if the U.S. decides to side with one of them and then go after somebody else, like say it is Vlad, say that the U.S. decides, you know what, we're going to help Vlad retake the Baltic states, and let's say then Georgia says, you know what, no, you're not taking Georgia's sons and putting them into that conflict because that's not right. You know, because you're exterminating whoever, you know, or whatever it is. Do you think, you know, in that instance that might be the line versus, you know, you could make a really wimpy line and, you know, along like
symbolic. You can make a feel good statement.
Yeah. Right. Because, I mean, and I will say this. I mean, with the two indictments that were on the Logan Act, the second one in the 20th century, it had to deal with, this one was in 1852, actually. Jonas Phillips Levy was the second and last person to be indicted under the Logan Act, and he was a merchant sailor who was living in Mexico and wanted to build a railway across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is the narrowest point across Mexico. And Secretary of State Daniel Webster had been pressuring Mexico to accept a treaty that would allow a different group of American businessmen to build the railway. And Levy wrote a letter to the Mexican president, Mariano Arista, urging him to reject Webster's proposed treaty, prompting Webster to seek an indictment against Levy for the Logan Act. Well, this was not a wartime side. This is completely financial.
Yeah.
So it has been enacted not only in wartime, the first one, which was part of that one, interestingly enough, Francis Flournoy, who was a Kentucky farmer, wanted to have the western part of the United States secede and ally with France.
Huh.
Yeah, which was before that, but in 1803. But yeah, so there are different reasons that I mean, should states have that ability? I don't think when we're dealing with economic issues like that is an okay place to do it. You got to let the government do what the government does. The federal government, what isn't been enumerated to them in the Constitution. I think if they're acting outside of the Constitution, that's a different question.
Yeah, but the same question would arise. Where's that line in the sand?
Right.
Where's the line in the sand between entering into negotiations or entering into it? Because they can always make the case, well, we didn't sit down and sign our names to a treaty. They're doing something and we're copying them.
Yeah.
But what they're really doing is undermining the few powers of the federal government that are actually being followed in the Constitution, which 99% of what they do is would make the founding fathers turn over in their graves.
Right.
So, I mean, what it's going to take is a test case. I mean, it's going to take, and who's the arbiter of it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it ends up with the courts. It just becomes as political as anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd have to be decided with an indictment and a verdict of 12 impartial jurors.
Yes.
That's the only way this is ever going to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, but it just the drift toward global government is one of my biggest concerns.
Yes.
And erasing our border, and to me, every international thing that is, I would argue, imposed on us, because I still think this is, and again, these city halls, are they sitting down asking their citizens whether they want to be a part of this? Are they having hearings, getting feedback, and is every step transparent? And of course not.
No.
Every proposed ordinance. I mean, they're doing this in a backdoor fashion, and the consequences of that are high.
Right.
So, I mean, are we looking at this getting Is this going to get as out of control as minimum wage, tobacco 21? I would argue it probably is already. And the consequences are probably more dire. This is not talking about a 19-year-old having a cigarette. We're talking about changing the United States from being the engine of the world's economy to really dragging it down, I would say,
right,
to where the rest of the world is.
Yeah, and when you have something eating at you from the inside, I mean, that really brings something down a lot faster.
Oh, all great empires fall from within.
Yes, and they've gone to the root. I mean, they've gone to eat at the roots. The roots are what gives a tree stability, what gives it nutrients, what allows it to stay standing up in a storm. But you've got people like this United States Conference of Mayors that are sold out to this idea of we're going to do whatever progressive policies we want, and we're even at an international level, we're going to take them back to our cities and we're going to implement them. Burnsville Mayor Elizabeth Kautz was a past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So all you folks in Burnsville,
sorry,
stop electing her, please. Okay. Said, mayors won't quit. We care about the environment and energy efficiency. Mayors will make a difference. Mayors will come together to get this done. We must protect the planet. So they could give a care less about what the federal government has done or not done. They are committed to doing this no matter what. So,
again, there's no consequences for not following the Constitution and usurping an enumerated power in the Constitution. Period.
Right.
I mean, but where does it end? I mean, if let's just pretend that Obamacare was repealed.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to bet that people get sued and end up in courts,
right,
which is not the final arbiters of law, but I mean it would be undermined by how many cities, states, and counties?
It would go to the county level because they're who handle the health and human services
right,
now.
They do the dirty work,
and so you would find county-wide initiatives, probably spearheaded by states in some instances.
Depends on in Minnesota, that's true.
Yeah.
In every state, I'm not sure that the counties all do that. But,
right.
So, I mean, could we have let me just throw out another example.
Yes.
We make a trade agreement with, I'll use something like, what was that Trans-Pacific Partner?
The TPP?
TPP. We rejected the TPP.
Yes, we did.
What if a city or a state decides, well, we're going to not make an agreement necessarily with that government.
Just voluntarily follow
We're going to volunteer. We're going to follow the TPP, even though it's not law and it never came past. I mean, because you could make the argument that they aren't just the same way with the climate change. That hey, we're not sitting down negotiating.
Right.
We're just we've just decided we're going to freely allow the countries in the TPP to do business here in California or in Nevada or Texas or New York or wherever. I mean, is that a possibility?
I suppose they could.
Because every trade agreement has winners and losers.
Yeah.
There's exporting states, there's importing states, there's manufacturing states, there's farming states.
Yeah.
They all don't necessarily see eye to eye on, there's people who support tariffs, people who don't. There's people who, so how do you reconcile all that? And at the same time, we've set the precedent, though, which has been set many times, that, if we pull out of an international deal, well, we'll just do it ourselves.
Right.
So what stops if California can join the Paris Accords, why can't they join the TPP?
Right. What's stopping them?
I don't know. Gavin Newsom hasn't realized it yet.
Right.
I don't know.
All you would have to do is have like the United States Conference of Mayors say, we
the TPP could create their own NGO.
Yeah.
and everybody voluntarily decides to. I don't know all the details of the TPP, but
right.
I mean, could something like that happen?
Something like that. What about immigration, where you maybe don't have a formal treaty signed, but you have a wink and a nod agreement that
it's already happening.
If they come through this city,
we're not going to do anything.
We won't do anything.
Yeah, I mean that's already here with sanctuary cities.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, but I mean, could that still happen? I mean, let's just say there's a deal tomorrow on immigration,
right?
And let's just say more border security, or there's something dealing with sanctuary cities, or path to citizenship, or all the stuff that's been talked about. Let's just say that happens tomorrow. Okay,
right.
Again, if cities are already flaunting federal law, what stops them from saying, yeah, we don't like that, so we're just going to do what we want to?
Well, in some cases they have. I mean, allowing illegal immigrants to vote in local elections in California.
That's being pushed. It's legal in some places.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's I just think the whole process and legality has gotten no discussion here. That it's all just perceived as a political horse race, and nothing's being talked about the possible consequences that this can have. I mean,
right.
You're right, though, at the beginning, Jay. It's all about two sides basically entering in a contract and almost policing it themselves.
Yeah.
Because you really can't. What are you going to do? I mean, you make an agreement with North Korea and they don't follow. What are you going to do?
Yeah, nothing.
I mean, send them to detention? I mean, you're not going to do bomb them? I mean, what?
Right.
You're entering into a argument or a agreement of good faith. I mean, I always laughingly use the Versailles Treaty as Germany couldn't do 100 different things and they did 200 of them and nobody did a thing. So what good was that treaty in the end, even though we never agreed to it?
Right.
So, the continuing globalization and the continuing line between where an issue goes and following the Constitution, if we even know what's in it anymore, is so thin as to almost be non-existent.
Right.
So fun stuff yet again. I mean, yet again, we bring good news. I mean, the show starts with the Dukes of Hazzard off the air. Then I rip on poor Jill Taylor, and then we talk about the global covenant of mayors again. I mean, it's just all downhill.
That's all right. I hopefully all y'all that are listening out there in Community Solutions land.
That's right.
Hopefully you see the importance of having a principled city council. It's not something you can just write off. It's not like, it's just about the dog catcher and Bill's fence.
That's what it should be. Yeah. I mean, let's remember something.
To a point, I mean, obviously there's still needing to get, street reconstruction.
True.
And there are very legitimate functions of local government, but we tend to write it off as all fluff. But there is so much that is happening underneath the surface where progressives are just churning and churning and churning and churning, trying to make progress on being able to implement all of their stuff at the local level so that it makes it 100 million times harder to root out, because you've got to go to each locality and try to take it out versus getting rid of something at the federal level or getting rid of something at 50 states. I mean, we have 853 cities here in Minnesota. Good luck rooting that out of all the cities, let alone 853 plus whatever in every state.
Root it out of 10, you're doing good.
Yeah. And so we've got some work to do. I mean, we have to get our defenses right so that we can play offense. We are in a position, and we have allowed ourselves to get in a position where we have to play defense. We have to stop playing defense.
Yeah, they're always first and goal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, we got to get them 4th and 20 on their own 3.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And even that's not good enough.
We got to send them back to the locker room and nail the door shut.
I'm kidding.
Oh.
We'll keep the cheerleaders.
Okay. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
No idea either. We'll keep them in the locker room and steal their cheerleaders. How does that sound?
All right. Oh, my goodness. Oh, well, thank you guys for joining us again. And like I was saying, this is important stuff. So the only way to circumvent it, the only way to put a stop to it, start playing offense, is to get people onto city councils, get them onto advisory commissions, and just start saying no.
Yeah, and I'm gonna indict Jake Spano under the Logan Act. I'm gonna start that campaign.
You're gonna start that campaign?
Yes,
I'd like to see how that works out.
Me too.
Maybe an easier one would be
or the Burnsville mayor.
The Burnsville mayor.
She ought to be
Elizabeth
indicted.
Coates.
Now that you read the Logan Act, I want her indicted under the Logan Act.
Yeah,
we'll name it the. What's her last name?
Coates.
The Coates Spano Act. We're gonna Minnesota. We're gonna rename it.
I love it.
They'll be joined at the hip forever.
I love it. That'd be perfect.
So just wait a minute.
Yeah,
That's another thing in my run for governor.
There you go.
We got the BST.
Yeah.
We got the Kuntz-Spano Act. Okay. We got the Destroy the Met Council.
Right.
And we got, what was there was one other one I can't think of, but it doesn't matter. That's enough, right? That's my 3 things.
Yeah, that's your 3
There
things
was a
right there.
4th, but I can't think of it.
That's all right.
So maybe it was to remove the income tax or something.
That would be a good one.
There's my campaign right there.
I like it.
And you can take the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I'm sure they're guilty. I'm just going to assume they're guilty, and and a whole bunch of others too that we're not going to get into those cities right now. But they all will be indicted under the Kuntz-Spano Act of Minnesota, and then I'm going to increase the BST in those cities too.
Oh my goodness.
All right, now I'm in a good mood. I've been in a crappy mood this entire show, but now I feel better now.
There you go. If you want to help us prosecute these mayors, spread this show far and wide. Tell everybody. Tell your neighbors. Tell your friends. Tell them beware, we're coming.
Pretty soon, we're going to be on Isaiah's naughty list. There.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to go back and listen to the last episode for that.
To.
We're digging into some deep stuff, and we're going to keep digging deeper because until we unearth all of this dinosaur, it's going to have the potential to come back and bite us in the butt. So, please, if you need to get a hold of us, you see this stuff going on in your community, you want to do something about it, COMMsolutionsMN@gmail.com. That's COMMsolutionsMN@gmail.com, and we will work with you to figure out how to turn your community around. And we're going to go back and do some more research, come back with an even betterest podcast next week. So don't you go anywhere. Tell all your friends, rate this thing and share it and get it out there so that other people can learn all about this wealth of information we put out there for you guys. We love you, Minnesota. Now it's your turn to get to work.